Hi, in this video we're going to revise and explain how successful the Great Heathen Army was and the impact it had on England. This question is really important because it's not just about what happened, it's about making a judgment over time. As we go through, I want you to keep thinking, were the Vikings always successful and did their impact last? In 865, a large Viking force known as the Great Heathen Army arrived in England. It was led by famous Viking leaders, including the brothers Ivar the Boneless and Halfdan Ragnarsson, as well as Guthrum, who also led part of the Viking army and was responsible for signing the treaty that established the Danelaw. Historians estimate the army was between 500 and 2,000 warriors. This made it much larger and more organised than earlier Viking raiding groups. This is really important. Earlier Vikings came to raid and then leave, but the Great Heathen Army came to invade, conquer, and settle permanently. That is why 865 is seen as a turning point in Viking history. At this time, England was not one united country. It was divided into four main Anglo-Saxon kingdoms: Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, and Wessex. Each had its own king and often competed with each other. This made England much easier to invade because the Vikings could attack one kingdom at a time instead of facing one strong, united army. This helps explain why the Vikings were so successful at the start. As we go through the events, I want you to think like a historian. Ask yourself two key questions. Was this a success or a failure? And did Viking success increase or decrease over time? And add these key events to your timeline as we go through the video. In 865, the Vikings landed in East Anglia and overwintered at Thanet. The king gave them horses so they would leave peacefully. This shows that there was very little resistance, so this is a clear early success for the Vikings. The Vikings then moved north into Northumbria and captured York. York was a very important city, so this was a major victory. They defeated the Northumbrians and killed their king, and the Viking sagas suggest that the Vikings executed King Egil using the blood eagle ritual. This shows strong Viking organisation and military power. At this point, their success is very high. In 869, the Vikings returned to East Anglia. They defeated King Edmund and took full control of the kingdom. This shows continued expansion and growing Viking power. They are still highly successful at this stage. 870 to 71. Between these years, the Vikings attacked Wessex. However, they failed to defeat King Alfred. This is very important, and this is the turning point. For the first time, the Vikings faced strong resistance and were unable to win. 873 to 74. The Vikings then conquered Mercia and forced King Burgred to flee. This shows that they were still powerful and capable of success. However, their success is now less consistent than before. In 878, under the leadership of Guthrum, the Vikings attacked Wessex again, but this time they were defeated by Alfred the Great at the Battle of Edington. This was a major defeat. It clearly shows the limits of the Vikings' power. In 879, the Vikings made peace with Alfred. This agreement was known as the Treaty of Wedmore, and this led to the creation of the Danelaw. So this is a mixed result. The Vikings kept control of land in the north and the east, but they failed to conquer all of England, so their success was only partial. Let's have a look at the big picture. So if we step back and look at the overall pattern, we can see a clear journey. East Anglia, then Northumbria, then Mercia, and finally Wessex. At first, the Vikings were very successful, but over time their success declined as they faced stronger resistance. This idea of change over time is very important for your exam answers. So how successful? Let's summarise their success. So the Vikings were successful because they faced little resistance at first. They captured York, they killed many kings, controlled large parts of England. This shows strong military organisation and effective strategy. However, they were not completely successful. They failed to defeat Wessex, were defeated at Edington, and were forced to make peace instead of fully conquering England. So this shows their limitations. Overall judgment. So a strong judgment would be something like, the great heathen army was highly successful in conquering large parts of England, but ultimately failed to achieve total control because they could not defeat Wessex. So, how successful were the great heathen army? So the great heathen army was initially very successful. After arriving in 865, facing little resistance in East Anglia and quickly gaining strength. Their success peaked between 866 to 69 when they captured York, killed the King of Northumbria, and conquered East Anglia. However, their progress slowed when they attacked Wessex in 870 to 71 and failed to defeat King Alfred. Although they regained some success by conquering Mercia, they were never able to fully defeat Wessex. From 876 to 78, their fortunes declined sharply, ending in defeat at the Battle of Edington. By 879, the Vikings were forced to make peace with Alfred, leading to the division of England under the Danelaw. Overall, the army was highly successful at first, but ultimately failed to achieve complete control of England. So what was the impact of the great heathen army? So one major impact of the invasion was the creation of the Danelaw. This was the area of England controlled by the Vikings. In this region, they ruled using their own laws and customs. This created a lasting Viking presence in England. Another important impact was assimilation. So assimilation means when one group of people settles in the place and their culture mixes with the people already living there. The Vikings settled, farmed land, and married the Anglo-Saxons. Over time, their cultures blended together, and we can still see this today. For example, many English words come from Old Norse, such as sky, egg, knife, and window. We can also see it in place names, so place names ending in by, like Derby or Grimsby, or Thorpe, like Scunthorpe, show where Vikings settled. This shows that Viking influence lasted for hundreds of years. So let's have a look at a 9-mark question and a model answer. So, a 9-mark question. Write a clear and organised summary that analyses the Viking invasion of the Great Heathen Army. Support your summary with examples. So, here is a pretty strong response. So, the Viking invasion of the Great Heathen Army was very successful in the early years because they quickly defeated several Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. For example, they captured York in 866 and took control of Northumbria, killing its king. They also conquered East Anglia in 869 after defeating King Edmund. This shows they were successful because they expanded rapidly and took advantage of the weaknesses and divisions of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. However, their success was limited in the long term because they failed to conquer all of England. This is shown by their ability to defeat Wessex, especially after their defeat by Alfred the Great at the Battle of Edington in 878. As a result, they were forced to make peace and accept the Treaty of Wedmore, which divided England. This means that although they gained land, they did not achieve total control. Even though their overall success was only partial in the short term, the Danelaw did have a long-term impact on English culture and language. So, why this is a good answer? So, 2 points based around a second order concept, using specific evidence to support your points, and there's a clear focus on the question. So paragraph 1 is based around the second order concept of causation, so looking at why were they successful at first. Paragraph 2 is looking at consequence, so what was the results of the great heathen army invasion? Well, they were only successful partially. However, the long-term impact of the great heathen army was the Danelaw, which had a huge impact and consequence on English culture, language, place names, for example. So, the final summary then. So remember, with the Great Heathen Army, success is about short-term victories. Impact is about long-term change. So the Vikings did not fully conquer England, but they did change it forever due to the Danelaw. So over to you. Have a go at answering the question yourself. You want to be spending about 10 minutes on this exam response.